Hello, respected viewers. I'm George from Ireland, and welcome back to my channel once more. So, I'm commenting on the Platinum Jubilee of Her Britannic Majesty because today marks 70 years since she became Queen, and it's 70 years almost to the hour, because it's about 7:30 in the morning that King George VI's valet found the King dead in bed at Sandringham. That's one of the private royal estates at Norfolk, in Norfolk. So the Queen discovered she was a queen in Kenya. She became queen as she slept because of the, time zone difference. Well, actually, no, she probably would have got up before that because they're further east and had to be informed by her husband, Prince Philip. And you see this movingly recreated in The Crown. When she knew that her father was frail, she knew that he had lung cancer and so on. He was getting poor circulation in his leg, having to tap his calf to try and get a bit of blood into it. So see, in that film, it makes it seem like he went duck hunting in chilly and misty weather, almost deliberately to immolate himself by giving himself a fatal chill. And when the Queen went off on her Commonwealth tour, she took her mourning clothes with her so that she could come back craped in the deepest black if needs be. There are others who say that's actually not true, that when she landed, mourning clothes were brought onto the plane for her to change into, so she came off in mourning, complete with veil. And after the 1970s, nobody wore this. Of course, this is 6th of February 1952. He was the last King of Ireland, and yes, that was his title up until Easter Monday, 1949, when the Republic of Ireland was formally established by Dáil Éireann. We must have had a referendum about that one, and the United Kingdom passed the Government of Ireland Act, recognising that whilst the Republic of Ireland did not form part of His Majesty's dominions, nonetheless Irish citizens would not be treated as foreigners, very generously giving us the right to settle and work and vote in the United Kingdom. So the 70 years is actually today. And I remember 20 years ago with the Moles, the society in commemoration of the Small Gentleman in Black Velvet, a few loons, we went to Brown's restaurant in Oxford and we had a slap-up dinner, and then a notice appeared in John Evelyn, this gossip column in Charwell, this Oxford University undergraduate newspaper, saying, Tuesday night saw the British Empire united in solemn remembrance for our late sovereign lord, George VI of happy and glorious memory. And went on to say about this dinner. It was the inaugural meeting of a dining society called the Moles, which petered out about 10 years later. So the Platinum Jubilee won't be celebrated today because, of course, it's a time for the Queen to be sorrowful and to reflect on the decease of her father. And the main celebrations will be in June, partly because that's good weather. So the Queen's birthday is 24th of April, but they always celebrate it in June, usually the third Saturday in June. Again, because ideally there'd be glorious sunshine. So although she succeeded to the crown on the 6th of February 1952, she wasn't crowned till Midsummer's Day 1953. They have to allow a decent period of mourning, then the court can get out of mourning, and they have to organise the coronation ceremony. They have to invite all these heads of state and so on, and they've got to find time in their diaries to do so, and they couldn't do so at only 4 months remove, so giving themselves a year and 4 months to do so. But unfortunately, even though they'd scheduled it for the day least likely to rain, the heavens opened and there was a torrential downpours. Everybody was soaked, despite them having, you'd think, judiciously selected a day when it was at least likely that they were going to suffer from precipitation. So perhaps the skies were frowning upon her, but they didn't really put a damper on people's spirits. And people spoke of a new Elizabethan age just because she happened to have the same name as Gloriana doesn't mean that England and Wales, and indeed a little bit of Ireland, were going to relive the halcyon days of the Virgin Queen, and indeed they didn't. In 1977, that was the Silver Jubilee, and celebrating 25 years since Her Britannic Majesty inherited the crown, and the big celebrations. But what was there to celebrate? This would be the most abrupt decline in British fortunes in history. In 1952, the empire was still extant. All right, South Asia has gone, but everything else was still a colony. And by 1977, no, there had been such a terrible declension in British power and prestige. There were severe economic problems. There was high inflation. There was high unemployment. The Ulster conflict had erupted. the military been cut back and so forth. There'd been a rise in crime and drug abuse, and there were an awful lot of strikes. So there was very little to jubilate about. But by 1952, people were genuinely optimistic. Remember, the Queen, she was 25 when she inherited the crown, and Churchill said that she was such a film star. He'd come back into office only in October 1951, so only about 4 months before she became Queen. Remember, she originally wasn't expected to, because her father, George VI, or Bertie, as he was known in the family, he was the second son, and her uncle, Edward VIII, he was briefly king, January to December 1936. But he had abdicated. He renounced the crown and for himself and any children he might have, because he wished to marry the twice divorced Mrs. Wallace Simpson, and he was told it would cause civil war. So had he not done so, he would have been king. As it turned out, he and Mrs. Simpson were unable to have children. Now, Mrs. Simpson had not become pregnant, as far as we know, by either of her previous husbands, and Edward VIII had a childhood case of mumps, which supposedly rendered him infertile, perfectly capable of having children, of having intercourse, but not having children. So the Queen had to step up to the plate, and her father was terribly tongue-tied and suffered a severe speech impediment, as you may know. So the Queen, several years ago, became the longest reigning monarch in British history, Queen of the United Kingdom, or King, or monarch of just Scotland, a monarch of England, a monarch of Ireland, or any part thereof. Now, the only monarch in history who reigned for longer, methinks, was the son king, Louis XIV, King of France and Navarre, in the 17th and well into the 18th century, partly because he inherited the crown at the age of 3. So the Queen, how long is she going to survive? Because when one spouse passes, the next is called to her reward quite soon afterwards. And of course, Prince Philip died in April 2021 at the age of 99. Now, the Queen is fairly hale for a woman of her such advanced years, because she's now 95, having the best medical care there is. But nevertheless, no one that age is in completely rude health. She could go tonight, but I think she'll will herself to live till June at least. And there's a night in the press saying that Camilla, who's the wife of Charles, Prince of Wales, that she wants to be Queen Consort. People said she was so controversial, she was a hate figure in the 90s, that when King Charles became king, Camilla would just to remain something or other. Well, they haven't even made her Princess of Wales, Duchess of Cornwall, or Duchess of Rothesay. That's their title they use when they're in North Britain. We shall see. So the Queen won't be around there forever. People need to appreciate her a bit more. People think, well, she might have a fairly long illness like Prince Philip did for about a month, a bit of a warning she's about to go. No, she could drop like that. So we ought to appreciate her while she's still there. And then the announcement was made from St. James's Palace that the Almighty God in his infinite wisdom has seen fit to call to his mercy our late Sovereign Lady, Elizabeth Alexandra Mary, of happy and glorious memory. And so the crown does solely and rightfully pass to the high and mighty Prince Charles, Louis, Philip, Arthur, George, and so on. That's enough from me, so thank you so much for your donations, and keep subscribing. Toodaloo.